Okay. So we learned the steps in a civil trial last class. We're going to learn about the steps for a criminal trial this class. They're just some slight variations. So in a criminal trial, the primary thing that you need to keep in mind is that a criminal trial, the state or a governing body is representing the people in that trial. So when a crime occurs, it's considered something that's against society. So the state stands in and represents society in that case. The two sides to all criminal parties are the prosecution, representing us, the people, against the defendant, the person who's accused of the crime.
Ms. McGrath, since we've talked about juries, I know 5 people have gotten jury duty.
Really?
Yeah, 2 of my teachers and 2 family friends.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they sit on the
They haven't got their assigned, but they just got it in the
okay. Okay. Good. All right. What'd you say, Albert? Did you say?
He's on grand jury duty.
Who is?
Mr. Heidegger.
Oh, he's actually sitting on grand jury?
Oh, I'm not sure. Got the mail. But he had to go today, so he's absent today, so he's school.
That's
Okay.
the next 8 Wednesdays.
What's that?
If he gets selected.
If
What?
he gets selected, yes, and it's the next 8 Wednesdays.
Right, because when you go, grand jury is different than what we call petit jury. Petit jury is the actual jury that hears a case. Grand jury decides whether there's enough evidence to hold somebody to go to trial. Okay, so grand jury is kind of previews all the evidence and facts that they have at that point in time and decides whether or not we can bring a criminal, a suspected criminal to trial. So a criminal trial begins with the arrest. Whereas, what did we say that a civil trial begins with? Anybody remember? No, here's the nice thing. Where can you find out? Yeah.
Selecting the jury.
No, before that.
When one complaint.
Complaint, right? Exactly. Very good. It's when the plaintiff files a complaint. What is that called? Part of. The complaint is one part of. Good. The complaint is one part of the pleadings. What's the other part of the pleadings? The answer, right. So no civil trial can start without the pleadings, which consists of the complaint and the answer. However, criminal trial basically begins with the arrest of the accused. After the arrest, there is what we call the arraignment process. And basically what the arraignment does, it's when the accused goes and stands before the judge, okay, and they outline whatever the accused is charged with. So if there's enough to actually charge him with something, the second piece would be to go before a grand jury. And this is where the prosecution would present information and the citizens of the community would basically decide whether they think there's enough evidence to support proceeding to trial. If the grand jury says we think there's enough evidence to present this as a trial, then they'll what they call indict the defendant. And in the indictment, it basically outlines what he's charged with. So this is where they would say all the different things that he could be charged with. So one situation can have multiple different charges. So for instance, you could go in, you can break into somebody's house, you have a gun, so you might have, breaking and entering, you might have attempted robbery, you might have armed robbery, you might have actual robbery. You might have, if somebody's in there and you tie them up, you might have kidnapping. Okay, so you could have trespassing. So there's multiple different charges that can be brought as a result of one situation. Okay, so that's why, like, sometimes if you read in the papers, like somebody gets in a car accident and they maybe hit somebody or kill somebody or something like that, and you'll see that there's more than one set of charges. Maybe driving while intoxicated, maybe excessive speed. Could be attempted murder, could be reckless driving, right? So a variety of different charges as a result of one event. And then an arraignment is basically the formal hearing to inform the defendant about the complaint and charges. And this is where the defendant would say whether he's either guilty or not guilty. If he's not guilty, if he says that he's not guilty, then that's when it will proceed to trial. If he basically admits guilt, then they would go through the sentencing process. If he admits guilt, there really doesn't have to be a trial because he's actually admitted guilt. After the sentence has been determined, like whether or not, if he's not guilty, if he's not guilty and they decide that he should be held during the time between the arraignment and the actual trial, the defendant can request bail. And then if they determine that he's not like a fleeing hazard, they might set bail. Bail is all it is a sum of money or some items that they can hold up as value in the event that the accused does not come to trial. So if the person flees, then they basically take the money or the items that they put up as bail and they hold on to it and they keep it. It becomes the court's. Okay? It's just an amount of money that they set aside to make sure the defendant shows up for the trial. Then we go through those very similar steps. We select the jury. You have the opening statements. You have presentation of arguments and evidence. So this part is all sort of the same. Okay? They select the jury. They present the arguments and evidence where they do opening statements. They have... the prosecution presents their case, the defense presents their cases, they bring witnesses, so on and so forth. The judge gives the instructions to the jury, and then the jury goes and deliberates. What's different here than in a civil trial, so if you want to highlight this or circle this, two things, okay? First of all, if you remember last class when we talked about civil trials, did the decision have to be unanimous? No, right. The decision had to be majority. It did not have to be unanimous. In a criminal trial, the decision has to be unanimous. All 12 jurors have to agree. Okay? And that is because, essentially, when you have a criminal trial, most often the result is that somebody's going to lose their freedom. So since we in our country value freedom so greatly, it's been thought that with a criminal trial, since you're taking away somebody's freedom, there has to be a unanimous verdict. Okay? So, and then the other thing that's different here in a criminal trial is that somebody cannot be charged twice for the same crime. That's double jeopardy. The other thing in here with a criminal trial that I want to make sure that we have in here, let's see if my things will right today, is that you have to have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. So this is a higher burden. It's a higher burden. What do we say with regard to civil trials? Right, we said there had to be a preponderance of the evidence. So the majority of the evidence seemed to lead in the direction that the defendant was guilty. Criminal trial, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. Almost no doubt that the defendant committed the crime. Okay, so those are two higher burdens with regard to a criminal trial versus a civil trial. The other thing with regard to examples of a double jeopardy. It is not double jeopardy if somebody has a criminal trial and then has a civil trial relating to the same matters. Okay? The most famous case has to do with O.J. Simpson. And I'm sure most of you guys have heard of the case of O.J. Simpson, where he was charged with the murder of his ex-wife and her friend. In the criminal trial, he was found not guilty because of these two things. They had to have a unanimous decision, and it had to be beyond a reasonable doubt. So he was let go. He was released. He was not found guilty. Walks the streets. He was sued civilly. So he was charged with the murder and a bunch of different things relating to his wife's death, criminally. Civilly, the family members of his ex-wife's the family members of the ex-wife's friend, the guy who got killed, as well as the ex-wife's family. They sued him civilly. Remember, civil suit is you've infringed upon my rights. They sued him civilly for wrongful death. Okay? Meaning basically, it's a civil side of you've taken this person's life away from us. You've denied us the benefit of being with this person indefinitely because you've killed them. Okay? He lost the civil case. So he ended up having to pay tons of money to the family, his ex-wife's family, and the friend's family, because they proved in the civil trial that he committed the wrongful deaths of those people. Okay, because there's a lower burden of proof, preponderance of the evidence as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. So if it's a preponderance of the evidence, just majority of the evidence seems like it indicates the person's guilty. Okay, so he lost in those. So he lost in the one and won in the other. It's not double jeopardy though, because he's not being tried twice criminally. Once being tried criminally, once being tried civilly. In the civil trials, he can't be put in jail for the civil decision. He can really be penalized in the form of money, okay, or those other things. Remember we said there's monetary damages, there's specific performance, or there's an injunction, okay. Make him perform, stop him from performing, or give me money, okay. He gave money. The other thing too, like another example would be of situations where you could have two cases, but they're not the same. So there's no double jeopardy. So one situation resulting in two different cases. So there was the Oklahoma bombing, and there was a federal building that was blown up in Oklahoma, and oh my gosh, the guy's name is escaping me. Thank you. Timothy McVeigh was charged with the crimes in the state of Oklahoma. He was, basically charged with murder of all the people that were in those buildings. So he was charged, and he was found guilty in Oklahoma. He was also charged in federal courts for, I don't remember exactly, but like he was, I don't think it was treason. I can't remember what he was charged in federal court, but different laws apply in the federal court system. So he was charged in those crimes in the federal court system. He was charged with murder and a bunch of other things in the state court system. So two different sets of laws that he violated. He was criminally charged and convicted in state court. He was criminally charged and convicted in federal court. He's got to serve sentences for both cases. Okay, so in neither of those situations are double jeopardy because he's violated different laws. Okay. Sentencing. Then when we get to the sentencing phase in a criminal trial, The different types of outcomes in a criminal trial are that you can be fined, you can be imprisoned, or you can be charged with the death penalty or sentenced with the death penalty. And like in a civil trial, the defendant can appeal a decision if they do not agree with the decision and they believe that some points of law were violated in the criminal case. So if there was some point of law that basically they believe was misapplied, they can appeal that decision to a higher court. Juvenile cases. We looked at juvenile cases before, a little bit of explanation of what the juvenile cases were, but the process from a proceeding standpoint is that first they would hold a detention hearing, and that's where the judge would just determine what the accused is charged with. And then they hold what we call an adjudicatory hearing. And this is basically an informal hearing where the judge determines one of three outcomes for the juvenile defendant. They can either return home with supervision, they can go into some sort of foster care, or they can go to some sort of training or reform school, which I kind of talked to you guys a little bit about that last time. The judge can also require that the offender pay damages or do some sort of volunteer work or both. And with regard to juvenile cases, they're really trying to see if they can recuperate or basically rehab the offender so that they don't get to be worse, trying to keep them out of the court systems for the future. And that's really about it for the trial process. So, what I'm going to have you guys do is I want to go over the jury selection homework that you guys had last night. So I'd like for you to get with your, let's go with our reading partners. Meet with your reading partner. Say what? You don't have your sheet? You're supposed to hold on your sheet. Alright, so meet with your reading partner.
Who's my reading partner?